To kick things off, let's acknowledge the question that's been floating around gyms and online forums. Do men and women actually respond differently to supplements? Some people assume that because hormones or muscle fiber types differ between sexes, certain ergogenic aids must work better for one group than the other. In this video, we'll explore whether beta-alanine, the supplement that makes your skin tingle, produces different results in men and women. It's tempting to think that different bodies require different supplements, but the evidence doesn't always support that. Here we're going to look past assumptions and marketing hype. We'll compare what happens when men and women take beta-alanine, examine the science on muscle carnosine, and highlight where research is lacking. The goal is to answer a simple question: is there a sex-specific approach to beta-alanine, or do the same principles apply to everyone? Most of us associate beta-alanine with that familiar tingling or prickling sensation in the skin. That sensation is called paresthesia, and it doesn't tell you anything about performance. Feeling the tingle is not the same as improving time to exhaustion or peak power. So when we compare men and women, we won't focus on who feels the itch. We'll focus on who actually benefits from higher carnosine levels and better buffering. Beta-alanine is a naturally occurring beta-amino acid that your body doesn't use to build proteins. Instead, it pairs with the amino acid histidine to form a dipeptide called carnosine. Because beta-alanine is the rate-limiting component in that reaction, supplementing with it allows your muscles to synthesize more carnosine than they could from diet alone. Once beta-alanine combines with histidine, the resulting carnosine accumulates inside muscle cells at concentrations around 15 to 40 millimoles per kilogram of dry muscle. Those numbers are higher in fast-twitch fibers and in athletes who specialize in anaerobic events. Carnosine's imidazole ring has a pKa of about 6.83, which means it's perfectly positioned to pick up hydrogen ions when pH drops during hard exercise. Besides buffering acid, carnosine also scavenges free radicals and helps with calcium handling in the muscle. High-intensity exercise produces large amounts of lactate and free hydrogen ions. When those hydrogen ions accumulate, the pH inside your muscle cells falls, glycolytic enzymes slow down, and energy production suffers. By increasing intramuscular carnosine through beta-alanine supplementation, you increase the muscle's ability to buffer hydrogen ions. This helps maintain pH, delays the onset of fatigue, and keeps energy pathways running longer. Thanks to its buffering role, beta-alanine has been shown to improve performance in efforts lasting roughly 1 to 4 minutes, or repeated bouts where acid builds up. On average, studies report an improvement of about 2 to 3% in time to exhaustion or total work done when compared with placebo. That might not sound like much, but for competitive athletes in sprint cycling, rowing, swimming, or CrossFit, a few percent can be the difference between winning and losing. So do men or women get more out of beta-alanine? When researchers pooled data from multiple studies, the average improvement was nearly identical for both sexes. Men saw around a 2.8% boost, and women about 2.6%. In other words, beta-alanine works just as well for women as it does for men, at least in the studies we have so far. Beta-alanine doesn't work like caffeine. It doesn't hit you on day one. Carnosine builds gradually. After about 2 weeks of daily supplementation, muscle carnosine might increase by 20 to 30%. At 4 weeks, that rise can reach 40 to 60%, and by 10 weeks, it can approach 80%. To achieve these increases, you need to take roughly 3 to 6 grams of beta-alanine per day, split into smaller servings, and you need to be consistent. If you stop completely, carnosine levels drift back toward baseline over 6 to 15 weeks. Some studies report that women start with slightly lower muscle carnosine concentrations than men. That could be due to differences in sex hormones like testosterone or differences in muscle fiber composition. However, having a lower baseline does not necessarily mean women get less benefit. In fact, most evidence indicates that baseline carnosine levels don't predict how much you can increase them through supplementation. If you look at relative values, men often sit around 100 on a scale of muscle carnosine content, while women might be around 80. Even so, both groups still respond similarly to supplementation. The takeaway is that women might start a bit lower, but that doesn't mean they need a different approach. They simply follow the same loading protocol to elevate carnosine toward their own saturation point. A 28-day study led by Veronisky and colleagues put 26 men and women on 6 grams of beta-alanine per day. Researchers measured muscle carnosine levels and fatigue during repeated sprint cycling. Men began the study with slightly higher carnosine, but both sexes saw similar increases after supplementation, and both experienced less fatigue during intense exercise. The conclusion was clear: men and women respond to beta-alanine in comparable ways, and no special dosing adjustment is needed based on sex. In another trial focusing exclusively on women, 22 participants supplemented for 28 days. their ventilatory threshold increased by roughly 13%. Working capacity at the point of fatigue went up by about 12.5%, and time to exhaustion improved by about 2.5%. Maximal oxygen uptake didn't change, which reinforces that beta-alanine is about buffering high-intensity efforts rather than boosting aerobic capacity. This study supports the idea that women gain meaningful performance benefits from beta-alanine when dosed correctly. A recent meta-analysis looked at 28 studies with 575 participants. Only 89 of those participants were women, highlighting how underrepresented women are in supplement research. Nevertheless, the analysis found no statistically significant difference in response between men and women. The estimated difference in effect size was around negative 0.32, and the credible interval crossed 0, meaning sex was not a meaningful moderator of the supplement's effect. While the available data suggests men and women respond similarly, we have to acknowledge that most beta-alanine studies have been conducted on men. Very few trials recruit enough women to analyze results by menstrual cycle phase or contraceptive use. Hormonal fluctuations across the cycle might influence fatigue, metabolism, or recovery, but researchers rarely report or control for these factors. Until we have more female-specific studies, especially across different phases of the menstrual cycle, there will be unanswered questions. Estrogen may affect enzymes involved in carnosine synthesis, and progesterone could influence acid-base balance. The luteal and follicular phases of the menstrual cycle have different hormonal profiles, which could theoretically impact how muscles handle hydrogen ions and fatigue. However, no study to date has systematically tested beta-alanine dosing across the menstrual cycle. More research is needed to determine whether women should adjust timing or amount based on hormonal status. For now, the practical advice is the same for everyone. To raise muscle carnosine, take about 3 to 6 grams of beta-alanine each day, split into servings of roughly 800 milligrams to 2 grams. Continue this daily loading for at least 4 weeks to start seeing meaningful increases. After that, keep taking a maintenance dose every day to keep carnosine elevated. There's no evidence that men or women need to alter the total daily amount. Both men and women who compete in high-intensity sports stand to gain from beta-alanine. That includes CrossFit athletes, sprint cyclists, rowers, middle-distance runners, and team sport players who rely on repeated bursts of effort. If you're chasing small but meaningful improvements in performance that could translate into podium positions or personal bests, beta-alanine is worth considering. On the other hand, people who stick to low-volume strength training with long rest periods, or those focused on steady-state endurance events, may not notice much difference. The supplement also requires a commitment to daily intake for at least a month. If you're inconsistent or unwilling to put up with mild tingling, the cost and effort might not be justified. To wrap things up, the evidence shows that beta-alanine reliably increases muscle carnosine and improves high-intensity performance for both men and women when taken at the right dose and for long enough. Although women tend to start with slightly lower carnosine, they respond just as well as men. Where science falls short is in understanding how hormonal fluctuations or contraceptive use might interact with supplementation. Until more data emerge, the same loading and maintenance strategies apply to everyone. Focus on consistent dosing and don't judge success by the level of tingling. Trust the process and measure your progress in the gym or on the track rather than by sensation.